According to divorce.com, which, yeah, I'm surprised that's like an actual website as well, between 40% and 50% of married couples end up filing for divorce. Usually, second marriages have a higher divorce rate of 60%, and coming out on top are third marriages, which end at about a 73% divorce rate. Don't worry, this is not about to be some angry manifesto from a woman who is currently in the middle of her own legal untangling, succumbed to wearing the scarlet letter D for soon-to-be divorcee, who's wondering when her mood swings will dissipate. Her friends will stop looking at her with squinty eyes and tilted heads every time they ask, "How are you?" And random books with titles like Letting Go or The Acceptance of Your Anger. Even The Wild Woman's Ways will stop magically showing up in her mailbox. No, this is not a setup for her woman manifesto, or as I like to call it, a woman festo. This is also not about to be a backward sonnet about the ridiculousness of marriage. I am not here to poo-poo on anyone's I-do-dos. I actually love the idea of marriage and the legal joining of two people's lives together in the name of love. It's a beautiful thing that I believe should be honored and celebrated however any couple sees fit. Unfortunately, I started off reading the high percentage of divorce rates in the United States simply because it's true. It's hard to ignore that divorce has become part of many people's lives. And when you've walked through the unfortunate emotional and legal disentanglement of a marriage, you become indoctrinated into a club of divorced people who just fucking get it, for better or worse. Others will try to empathize to no avail, but it's just one of those things that you don't understand unless you've been through it yourself. It's like, if you've never been to Paris, then you don't get what it's like to go to Paris. You can imagine what it may be like to go to Paris, but unless you've actually been there, to see the Eiffel Tower, to bite into a baguette, you won't understand the smells and the sights and the feelings that it means to be in Paris. Except instead of Paris, divorce is more like being stuck in some beige legal room purgatory with bad overhead lighting where you pay a room full of strangers to pick apart your life choices and put those annoying little neon-colored garage sale price tags on your most sentimental belongings, all while requesting tax returns that never seem to be the right tax returns until one day it's all unceremoniously over. The one positive of being in the Big D Club, Big Divorce Club, that is, and the accuracy of Divorce.com's reporting of high divorce rates is that you're not alone. And if you feel alone, don't worry. Monica Heisey has got you covered. While her debut novel, Really Good Actually, is not a memoir, Monica felt inspired to write her anti-rom-com after failing to find anything that summed up what she experienced while going through her own divorce at the age of 28. Monica Heisey is a writer and a comedian from Toronto. She has been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Vogue, Elle, The Guardian, Glamour, New York Magazine, and Vice, among others. She has written for television shows like Schitt's Creek, Workin' Moms, Baroness von Sketch Show, and more. She currently lives in London, and I cannot recommend her first debut novel, Really Good Actually, enough. Please enjoy my conversation with Monica. That's why. Has it been sunny at all?
Like one day? There was one really beautiful day.
No.
Yeah. But it's been a rainy year, I hear. It's like there's kind of no time I could have come where it would have been much better.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I've been, I live in Nashville, Tennessee now. So I've been out of LA for a little bit. But I feel like I've been spoiled. Like it's kind of like Vancouver, Seattle, and London are all the same, where every time I've traveled there, it's been beautiful. Like I've never been to any of those places where it's been like the weather that, everyone talks about it just being so like biting and rain and cold and depressive. I've always been there when it's been like, come live here. It's amazing.
Yeah. When it's sunny in London, there's really nothing like it either. It's
yeah.
Good.
How long have you been there now?
On and off since 2010. I've been there for like my whole adult life, really. I went over to do grad school and then stayed because like the live comedy and writing scene was just so inspiring and exciting, and kind of kept coming back for the same reason. And also, I think they make the best television comedy.
Yes, that is very true. All right. I love your book, and I have like it's obviously the cover is fantastic as well. It's like this little peekaboo. It starts at the eyes and this like beautiful red hair and an updo, and you just see like black mascara running from the eyes. It's a fantastic cover, and I'm a sucker for a book cover and a wine cover. Like I know you're not supposed to shop by book covers and wine covers, but that is how I
It's
do a
the
lot of
only
my
way that
shopping.
I buy wine. Like I don't know anything about wine. I'm like, that looks stylish. I'm sure it
Yes,
will
I'm like,
taste.
this bird looks like the architecture of this bird and tree limb feels like
Mhm.
a good vintage. Yes, this is exactly what I need. Well, just the cover of your book paints such a beautiful picture of what you're going to be diving into. But I also just have to start with the fact that the character in the book is Maggie. You are Monica, similar names. Maggie, at the age of 28, after 10 years of being together with a partner, 2 years of official marriage, she finds herself getting divorced from a guy named John in an unceremoniously way, which means like no big, screaming match or affair. And you uh, got divorced at 28 as well. Now, is that where
Mhm.
the similarities between you and the character of Maggie end?
I I think so. I mean, we share a physical profile, I think is like the biggest one, but I just knew that I wanted to write about the emotional experience of divorce without kind of digging through my own dirty laundry, and like it felt a little bit unfair, I think. Divorce is two people's story. To write my own version of our divorce down and kind of publish it, but I knew I wanted to look at the feelings, which I felt really entitled to explore, because those are very personal. So I was kind of trying to create a vessel for like a character in which I could explore my emotional experience, but who I could also feel free to kind of put through her paces in a different way, or make things worse, or change things that they're funnier, or I kind of invented a version of myself that had none of the coping mechanisms that helped me get through my divorce. So she's like a bizarro version of me who's not me. And I certainly didn't behave the way that all the events in the book are fictional. But we cross over and overlap, I think, in a number of different ways.
And you wrote this book, you started the book around the 2020, correct?
Hmm.
And your divorce would have been finalized at the end around like 2010 or towards the end of that
No, in
decade?
like 2018. I
Oh,
feel
your
like
divorce was finalized in 2018.
so we split up in 2017, and it was finalized like a year later. Um, it was a bit of a slow one, and then I started writing a couple years after that. I wanted to give myself enough time that I would be writing from a place of hindsight, where, especially because it's comedy, I wanted to be able to see it clearly and have some time pass. So the things that felt intense, some of those turned out to not be as intense as they felt, and some of them did turn out to be as intense as they felt. And I just wanted to make sure I was doing like a careful inventory before I picked what I was kind of going to make fun of and what I was going to take seriously in the book.
When people look up books on divorce, it's usually it's like the pendulum swings in such extreme like categories. It is either anger, emotion, pick up the broken pieces of oneself, a description of what's that Japanese, you mention it in the book, and it's like the Japanese were like a vase that is broken and you put it back together and it's more beautiful. There's a word for it. We'll remember it at some point, but there is this word, and it has also been, I think everyone gets told that. That is like something that happens to everyone maybe going through a divorce. You get told that at least absolutely more than once. But the first time you're like, huh. By the
Mm.
second or third time you go, oh, this is just what everyone is saying. It's like this beautiful anecdotal band-aid. But you have like that genre, and then you have this other genre over here, which is just like, ooh, get out there and reclaim your territory, and you're a cheetah, and like badass, like new version of yourself. And there's not many that are just this kind of beautiful, combine yin yang of both of those things, where you are in your grief and also trying to kind of reclaim your sense of self at the same time, in a kind of like a nice version. And that is where I feel like the way you reveal Maggie's, experience as she walks through this process, that is the line I think you walk so wonderfully in the way you tell her story. Um, did you started off in comedy, obviously. You said that you moved to England knowing that specifically, chasing dreams of comedy. Was that what you were going there for?
I went over in the first place to do a master's degree in early modern literature. My parents were very like, comedy's not a real job, but academia is very safe, which is not true. I would say both of those jobs are really, really risky and in flux right now in particular. So I went over to do the one and ended up doing the second. Or I guess stayed to do the second. I finished the degree and I had a really good time doing it, but I also couldn't see myself continuing to study. It would take like 7 years to get a PhD, you know. And I found this other thing that had always been really passionate about and kind of remembered like, oh, I could, I guess, try. I could actually try to do it, you know, even if it is
And
difficult.
I've read in an interview of yours that you started stand up to like make friends.
Well, I had done improv and sketch and stuff in like university and high school, and then I moved to the UK and thought that my program would be like 12 kindred spirits. Who else is studying early modern literature? But I didn't quite like click with anyone in my program. So yeah, I just was like, how am I going to meet people in this enormous city? And started performing again and doing improv and sketch and stuff, and made some friends that I still have now. I was really lucky. It's a very welcoming community.
Yeah, and so rooted in storytelling. I saw that it took you to, and I still pronounce it wrong. I think Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yeah.
Edinburgh. Okay. I always walk the line of pronouncing it wrong, but I went last fall and just fell in love with Scotland as a whole. But Edinburgh specifically, I was just so, and just everywhere you went, part of like some of the tourism that you could have participated in, like was very much rooted in storytelling. There were even people who were just professional storytellers that you could hire to go to events or go to parties or take you on a walking tour. And I'd never known that part. So it's what a really special opportunity to obviously not, pick up where you left off in creating a community of other amazingly talented, like people who are into improv and comedy, but also in a place that really honors the root of storytelling and in captivating an audience.
Yeah, I think moving away somewhere, anytime you get a chance to start over, whether it's like for positive or more difficult reasons, you get to sort of decide everything again, which can be really intimidating, but also really exciting. So when I first moved to the UK, I think I hadn't even realized the scale of what I was doing. I was like leaving everything that I knew and had, and I had to re-choose or recommit to everything that I wanted, very consciously populate my life with the kind of people I wanted to be around and the kind of activities that I wanted to do and the places that I wanted to live and the things I wanted to see and have be important to me. So that was my first kind of experience starting over like that. And I feel like getting divorced in a lot of ways felt the same.
How did you find your way back to Toronto then? Had you met your partner before that, or?
Yeah, we were long distance for a bit when I was in London. I'd known him for a really long time. We were long distance while I was in London, and then my visas ran out in the UK, so I went back home. Um, and we'd been together for, I think, 5 years at that point. And he was a little older than me, so we started going to tons of weddings pretty much as soon as I got back. Everyone was getting married.
It's bizarre how weddings happen in seasons and then
And divorces kind of happen
babies
in
happen in
seasons
seasons
too.
and then divorces happen in seasons. Yeah.
Everyone's just watching what each other's doing and being like, that actually seems like a pretty good idea.
How long were you guys married?
A little under 2 years, just under 2 years. We were together for like 9 years, maybe 8.5 years in total.
So similar to within the story, it was like the entirety of your 20s, really.
Yeah, my whole 20s was with that one person. And I was really I gave the fictional marriage a little bit longer in the book, just to kind of dramatize what I was feeling, which was like, I don't know how to be an adult outside of this relationship. I've never done it before, which was really scary, and also felt insane to realize, because I thought of myself as a very together, self-actualized feminist person. And then I realized that I had so much of my identity was bound up in this partnership and this relationship. And I looked to it for so much of my, like, you know, it was a real guiding force in my life, that relationship, in many ways, in a good way, for positive, but also like, I was a little shocked by the intensity of the lack that I felt after that relationship was gone.
The lack of
just like the size of the hole that it left in my life. I think I hadn't quite realized how much of my time and emotional investment and interest and energy in particular was going into that relationship. And then suddenly I was just sitting there totally at a loss. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure I know what to do. I'm not sure I know what I like. I don't know how to spend my time, which was really shocking and very destabilizing. It made me feel a bit silly, because I thought I had a better sense of who I was in that.
Yeah, there's a few things. I feel like two elements is one, I mean, I've said this so much for anyone who listens to the podcast regularly. I feel like it's a manifesto at this point, but acknowledging that our brains aren't even fully formed until we are 25 years old, generally, and so I feel like that's been a very big thing I've looked back on, is just realizing this idea of having thought that, by mid to late 20s, it's like, yeah, I know exactly who I am. I'm like an adult now. It's like, whereas your brain is actually just fully formed and its ability for like realizing good decision-making skills, which I think is just something that we should all consider more.
It's so crazy that I can't think of anything that I chose in my early 20s that I would want to commit to for the rest of my life. Not a hairstyle, not, you know what I mean? Like, I guess my close friends from high school, I still have, but we've all changed a lot, and we're not asking the same thing of each other as like a romantic partnership, that though we can like spend weeks apart and just keep the group chat going, and that's enough for us. But like, literally nothing for myself in my 20s, my early 20s, I think is the same as I am now. I can't believe in many ways that everyone around us let us do it. Why are we going to all these weddings for all these 20-year-olds? It's such a crazy idea. This is my big pitch, though. Culturally, if we agreed that a 30th birthday could be like an extremely lavish event, everyone has to attend. They have to like make their excuses at work and like fly to wherever you're having the birthday, and you get to spend 10 grand on your outfit, and a photographer comes, and everyone you love gathers around you all dressed up and does a speech about how you're on the right track in life and you're going to be just fine and they love you, and maybe gives you a bit of money. We would have no weddings anymore, or at least way fewer weddings and concurrently fewer divorces. I think people get excited about the idea of this adult milestone and a good party and gathering their loved ones. And it's like, it is romantic to get married, but the party is a big part of it.
The party is the huge part of it, which is insane. It's like, I remember I went to a friend's wedding and they did something that I thought was so beautiful and I hadn't seen it done before. And I know they didn't invent it, but they signed the marriage contract in front of everybody. It became part of their ceremony. And it wasn't like an exciting, it made the ceremony much longer, but like, but it was important for them to be like, you all have to stand here and watch us sign this with people who are signing alongside of us in the hot, hot sun with no cocktail in your hand. And you're doing this with us, joining this commitment. And because it does so much become about the party and the event. And I love a freaking wedding. Like, I thrive at a wedding. I love it. God, I love it. I'm the jerk. I'm the asshole that always wants them to play shout, even if nobody wants to hear it. Like, I love a wedding, but I think that what you're saying, if that was something like a new cultural shift in a a celebratory milestone became just celebrating yourself without shame, or that was like an appropriate thing. I agree. I think people would feel okay if like wouldn't put so much pressure on the milestone of a matrimony. I also think what's interesting, what you did so well writing about in your book, was that this is a new generation of you're not just divorcing someone amongst your town or the city within that you live in. You are divorcing someone on your phone, on your social media platform. You are divorcing someone within not only just your friend group that is directly around you, but like all over the place. You are now taking down the billboard of what was your relationship that everyone was like awing at, that you've been putting up every day or every month or every year to just have everyone look at in amazement of how beautiful it looks. And you're just like slowly stripping it all down to be like, don't look over here, under construction or rebrand.
God, taking down the billboard, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah. Did you like, so if you were going through your divorce and separation around 2018 and you began writing in 2020, did you write down anecdotal notes of what you were experiencing at that time? Did you just remember everything? Did you have other friends that went through the divorce? Because I feel like you write about it just tonally hitting the nail right on the head.
I didn't take a lot of notes. It was just that it occupied like 70% of my waking thought for the whole year that it was happening. It took over my whole emotional state in a way that I regret and wish I had kind of like exercised a bit more control over. But I really was just like in like stewing in it for a year. So it felt very accessible to me even a couple years later because I had just been laser focused on like how bad it felt. And I maybe took a couple notes here and there, but they weren't super useful, again, because I fictionalized the plot. So it was more about accessing how I had felt at the time and thinking about, particularly with Maggie, I wanted to explore some of the impulses that I had during the divorce, but didn't necessarily act out on, or things that felt like, it's the great triumph of my life that I made it out of that period without cutting my hair. Um, the temptation to do a crazy breakup haircut was so strong. And my friends were like, you will regret it. And then you'll be sad and you'll have like a monk's haircut. So you just need to let it pass, let it wash over you. Like any of the other bad feelings, you just have to notice it, name it, and then let it go. Um, and I feel like and in the book, Maggie gives herself the haircut and bleaches her hair. And I think a lot of her impulses are relatable, but she does the unrelatable thing of acting out on almost all of them. So I thought about just like, what had I wanted to do? What am I glad I didn't do? And then kind of put all of that in the novel. It was very nice to be in a place where I felt distant enough from the actual pain feelings to be able to turn it into something funny, to be able to be like, oh, that's how it happened for me, but it would be better for the story if he was a little better behaved in this way, or if I was a little better behaved in this way, or whatever. It felt really nice to not feel like I was writing from a place of like trying to get out what happened to me. Like I had worked through it. I had done a lot of therapy and a lot of talking to my friends. And then this was just like taking all of that sort of raw data of experience and turning it into something else.
You mentioned that you look back and in just wallowing in it, but I feel like there's what other option? I mean, of course, there's like wallowing, but then there's also just like circumstantial wallowing. I mean, how can you not feel the weight and the grief of it? It is one of the more traumatic events that anyone can go through. Do you look back on that year also writing Maggie's experience and maybe have a little bit more grace for yourself? Or are you still feeling the emotional like ripple effect?
I think writing Maggie was interesting because I feel like I let her go a bit crazier than I let myself go. And I'm like, I wonder if it would have passed faster if I had let myself go a bit more crazy. Although if you ask my friends and loved ones, they might be like, I think you went plenty crazy. Don't worry about it. um, but I do think I think I was kind of putting a hat on a hat a little bit, in that I was feeling really bad. And then I was also feeling guilty about feeling really bad, and also feeling a bit embarrassed to still be feeling bad. Like a year on or something, I would still be like, I don't think I want to go to something if he's going to be there. I think I'll feel sad. And that made me feel like like a loser, or like I wasn't in control of my own feelings. But that's just how I felt. It was just sad. And I think if I was doing it again, and thank God I'm not going to, I would try to be a little bit less judgmental of myself for having a hard time. It's a hard experience, as you say. They say it's like death of a loved one, divorce, and moving house are the three most stressful experiences in adult life.
Yes. Yes. And usually when you go through a divorce, it also requires you to move and
Yeah.
it's like you're going to hit 2 or the 3. You're going to hit.
It's a perfect storm.
Yeah, it's the perfect storm.
It's like you have to move. You're heartbroken. You're doing a bunch of paperwork that you don't understand. You're like digging out old tax returns. It's just like every bad chore plus the thing that you thought would happen for the rest of your life isn't happening anymore. It's like on top of being devastating, it's just annoying. It's a really uniquely crap experience.
I wrote a little opening for this interview, and tax returns are a part of it. And so that makes me very giggly inside because there's so many freaking tax returns.
Oh, and I don't know where they are.
Don't know what any of them mean. They worked that 1 year 5 years ago. I don't know what they'd even do now, but apparently they do a lot. Oh man. You write so beautifully about your friends and or Maggie's friends in the book, and also just saying that how much you leaned on them. And I think that is something that often gets kind of brushed over in a lot of literature, self-help literature that explore the divorce area. It's really leaning on yourself and like reframing your mind, and so reading, I think it's just you've created this wonderful space that just shows what it actually is like, because you do need to be able to lean on people, even if people don't always know how to be there for you. And that's why I think you did a wonderful job with Maggie's friends. Do you feel like you've come out the other side now, looking back, of leaning on your friends, but also seeing that that's just part of sometimes that makes us human? We need other people in our lives. Sometimes we need a hand to hold to walk over, walk through the scary tunnel, and we don't want to necessarily do it by ourselves. Have you made peace with that on the other side of it?
Yeah, totally. I think the thing with a lot of, personal growth and self-care is that it is so focused on the individual and focused on the self. And there is lots of work you can do with yourself, but always being self-focused can really turn into being a bit isolated, I think, or turning away from the support that is being offered to you that's external to you. And as you say, sometimes you aren't up to the task all by yourself every day. And self-care is important, but so is community care, and so is accepting community care, being there for your community and letting them be there for you. And it can feel really scary and a little embarrassing to admit, like, I need help with this, or I'm, struggling with this in a way that I don't think I can handle on my own. But it's the most helpful things that I did during the divorce were reaching out to friends and loved ones and a therapist, like just calling in reinforcements. It just couldn't be just me. And I really wanted the novel to be like a love letter to those other support groups and those other kinds of love that are so enormous and important in life, and can sometimes be overlooked, as you say. I think because they're so freely given, it's not as fraught as romantic love, but it's just as long lasting, in many cases longer lasting. They're there before the boyfriend becomes your husband, becomes your ex-husband, and they're there after. And I just really wanted to celebrate that kind of love, and to, it is a bit of a love letter to my friends who got me through it, because they were amazing. And ideally, obviously, in your friend group, you take turns who is the Maggie of that particular week or month. You don't want to be the one who's the garbage tornado every single time, but I think it's really inspiring to see people turn up for each other, and it makes me want to be a better friend when they turn up for me, and it feels good to turn up for them. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about like just turning to your friends and being like, "Ugh, I can't do it. I can't do it right now. I need something."
I love there's a moment where Maggie talks about wanting to buy flowers for all of her friends who've been there for her and realizing she would just bankrupt herself in the attempt to try to just like express her gratitude with floral arrangements. And it is like you do need, you need your people. And it is also what I think is really interesting for once it is, we started this off just talking about like the bizarre club, of being divorced. But when you do say that you're going through it, anyone who's been there immediately like jumps out of the woodwork and is like, how are you? Like, in the way that they ask means that but in a way that they know what you're going through because they've been there. And there is this really bizarre club it is this weird club of even just strangers, where the second that they hear that word, the D word, they're just like, if you ever need anything, I'm here. If you ever have, like, it is just this new like language that gets spoken amongst people that have been through a divorce. Did you find that for yourself when you were going through it? Because you were also so young. That was the other thing, that it must have been a bizarre experience to be so young going through a divorce, because you were 28 years old.
Well, that was the problem, I think, was that I didn't know anyone else who was getting divorced at the time. And so like I had all of the normal divorce feelings of isolation and shame that kind of everyone has. But then I was also looking around and I was like, oh my God, I'm the only person that's screwed up this badly in our entire city, maybe. Like I just didn't know anyone who was getting a divorce. So there's a character in the novel, Maggie meets a woman called Amy, who's sort of a friend of a friend. And this ended up happening for me too. You ended up kind of getting set up with other young divorcees, not in a romantic way, but in a like, nobody really knows what to do with you. And maybe you guys can help each other way. And like you say, there is just something so special to kind of like spend an evening talking, sharing notes with someone who is going through something similar. And being able to find those people was a real lifeline for me. And now, of course, there's way more divorced people. And with the book, I'm hearing everyone's divorce story at every book event. A woman came up to me in a coffee shop the other day and was like, I left my husband last week. And I was like, oh, I hope you read the book and you're not just going around telling people this in a coffee shop. But I'm hearing from everyone, and I think it feels really nice to be able.
I'm assuming she had read the book, right? She did read the book.
Had.
She did not just, okay. She
I
didn't just go
I
like,
remember that impulse of wanting to
Yeah.
tell people and like just to spill your guts to kind of whoever. And I didn't really have anyone that I felt understood what I was going through in a very immediate way for the first like 6 months to a year. So being able to provide that to people who have read the book has like felt really special, actually. It's been really nice.
Well, and there's no way to casually say it. Like I have yet to figure out like it is mortifying. Like it is, I don't know how to just say it. It's hey, seeing other friends at like a birthday dinner. How are you? Fine. What's new? Not much. Well, how is before you even ask that question, I'm getting a divorce. I'm separate, but it's fine. But I'm great. It happens. Yeah. I didn't invent the wheel. People do this all the time, and I'm okay with it. I mean, it's hard. It's sad, but it's fine. And I'm going to get there to the other side. But right now I'm here. And how are you? And that is where I am at. And how are you? And it's
so many like caveats and excuses, and it's like, it's not an emergency. Obviously, it's very sad because you don't want to seem. It's such a like, it feels almost like a public relations thing, but like on a personal social scale, where you're like, well, I don't want to be too happy because that makes it seem like I'm not sad, and I am sad. But I don't want to be too sad because then that's pathetic. And I don't want to be too angry because then I'm the jilted ex. And it feels like there's like a tightrope that you're walking to try and seem normal about it. When in reality, I think, again, if I was doing it over, I would be like, we're separating and we're probably going to get a divorce. And it's been really unpleasant, but everyone's going to be fine. You know,
Yes.
just like a bit more. But at the time, it's like frantic.
Yeah, no, at the time it just feels like I want to like wheel in a PowerPoint presentation and just with like a laser pointer and be like, so this is where we're starting, this is where we're ending, and we are done talking about it for the rest of the night. Please just ask me about my dress.
Yeah, I
And I
know.
will like, can we just talk about the weather? Can we please talk about the weather?
I knew a couple who basically sent out like in their social group press release, they like composed an email together that was like, we're getting a divorce. We care about each other a lot. It's just not working. Rather than have this conversation over and over with everyone we know, we just thought we would send out an email so you know, and that's what's happening. And it like caused a sensation, obviously, in our social group at the time. Everyone was like,
this is very #uncoupling.
Did you get the email? But then also, when I was going through my own divorce, I was like, God, I wish we could have sent an email, because you have to experience that kind of shame, pain, projection, like self-defense cocktail every time you tell a new person.
Yeah.
Until people start to like gossip amongst themselves and then spread the word for you, which is sort of helpful, actually.
Yes. Or like Vanderpump has a Scandival and then everyone's talking about that instead. And then everyone can just move on
Take
to
some
more
of the heat
important
off.
things. Yes. Yes. Reality television. You were also, I have to ask about your experience writing on Schitt's Creek, which is such a beloved show, also a favorite of mine. And you were actually going through your divorce while writing on the show. Is that hard to be able to separate what you're going through with also I know it's your job, but it just, whenever anyone watches that show, everyone gets such like happy, delightful feelings of just like hope and love and like, just adoration for these really wonderful characters. And so was there a juxtaposition of what you were going through in your own life and, personally, and then also going professionally to write these like really hopeful, loving, peaceful stories?
It was difficult. And I found myself a little bit resentful of how distracting it was, because I really was excited to be there and wanted to be really focused. And there were definitely days where I felt like I was not as focused as I could have been. Some days it felt easier than others. I mean, that the season where my marriage was kind of falling apart was season 4, which is where David meets Patrick. So we were talking so much about like, what does it look like to meet the love of your life? What does it look like to meet someone who sees you and understands you and loves you without losing themselves and asks you to just be yourself, and that's enough. So that was interesting, and kind of to like be thinking about that as I was realizing that like, oh, I'm not sure that this is working for me. Actually, the thing that I'm in is not providing these feelings. It doesn't feel like unconditional, really. But you want your head to be in the game a bit more. You don't want to be like drifting off and thinking about like, hey. And also Patrick's a fictional character. So it was they were separate on a good day, and then they felt really connected and confusing on a bad day. But I think that's sort of true no matter what you're working on. There's always some source of stress in your life that kind of you do different levels of well at keeping out of your professional life. But that was a particularly spicy year, I would say, for me.
Just hearing you talk about that time makes me think of Maris. There's like a line that stuck out where Maris, the upstairs neighbor, is talking to, it's New Year's. And she says, you need to practice walking around, living life, and being heartbroken at the same time. Because we like to think that, healing is done in some sort of meditative state with like, bath salts and, Kleenexes and Nancy Meyers movies or like long walks or, trips with your girlfriends, an obscene amount of, tequila and wine and some guy or gal or whoever who's just going to magically make, get in your groove back in a way. And although those are really fun ideas, and for some, maybe that is their route. But I think that it was just so perfectly said that I feel like that is what the most significant part of healing from any kind of heartbreak is, just waking up and being able to walk through life, feeling your heart being broken and realizing, but you're living at the same time. It's just a part of who you are at that moment, and it will get better. But that is what I think gets skated over so often. It's like it just kind of has to suck for a while.
And I think in a way, it can be kind of empowering to know that you can do that. I don't think I thought there, like in the early days of my breakup, I really cocooned and kind of canceled everything and just like stayed in my house and was like, it was like I was quarantining. I was like, I'll do my 2 weeks. And then at the end of it, the virus will leave my body and I will go back out into the world and be fine. And I was so annoyed to discover that actually you have to just like live regular life, talk to friends, show up for your loved ones, like continue to work and live, and have this like wound that is still healing. But then now when I look at it, when I was thinking about writing Maggie, I was like, I think it's actually amazing that people can do that they can be carrying around this very personal pain and a lot of embarrassment and shame and just still be carrying on with the rest of their tasks of daily living and like having faith that it will eventually get better. I feel like it's a bit like, I said this before, but I feel like it's kind of like food poisoning, where like, you've had food poisoning before. It's going to pass eventually. But there's always a part at like 2 a.m. on the floor in your bathroom where you're like, I think this is going to be it for the rest of my life. I live in the bathroom now. But you just have to remember that even though it feels like that now, and it has felt like that for a long time, and it might feel like that for a little bit longer, it's not going to feel like that forever. And not losing sight of that is really hard, but like the only thing that really works to not go totally nuts, I think.
I wonder often how many times a therapist has to say within one day, like, nope, this will not last forever. It will get better. Because as someone who also is a big fan of therapy and making sure that you have, comrades around you and, just while you're battling your own feelings and just trying to figure it all out and walking through more difficult or just absolutely fine times in life. I really love therapy. And, I feel like I even had the amount of times my own therapists have had to say, like, nope, this does not last forever.
Yeah.
But it's so hard when you're on the floor at 2 a.m., just clutching that toilet bowl, feeling the highest effects of it.
Yeah. You're like, this is it. This is me.
This
And of course
is
it's not.
it.
I mean, it's like, and it's not because you thought that you were going to be with that person forever and that ended. So obviously the way that you feel now, it makes sense. Things end. The thing you're processing is the fact that things end. So why can't you accept that the negative thing's going to end as well? And maybe even move on to something more positive.
What has writing Maggie's story revealed to you about your own?
That's a really good question. I think it showed me how rigid and a little bit ungenerous I was being with myself during that time period. So looking at those emotions, and I've had some feedback from readers like, I went into this thinking it would be, and it is funny, but I went into it thinking it would be like light because it's funny. And actually it's like very difficult, some of it to read. It's very intense. And writing it, I think I hadn't really let myself realize in the moment how intensely stressful and painful it was all feeling. I was like just trying to like get through it, and push past it and do it right and be like the most mature version of myself and not let anyone see that I was freaking out. Which of course I did not even always do successfully, but I think it would have made a lot more sense to admit that I was kind of freaking out. to both myself and to other people, to be like, I'm being leveled by this thing, instead of just like lying on the floor being crushed, being like, I'm fine, I'm really good, don't worry about me. I think I think I was like too hard on myself. I don't know why I expected myself to know how to handle it. I was 28 years old and totally heartbroken, and didn't have any kind of precedents in my life or role models who had been through something similar at a similar age and knew how to behave. So I was just like totally adrift and trying to pretend that I wasn't. I don't know why it was so important to me that no one know. Of course I was.
Because I think a lot of specifically women relate to that. You know, if you like, I think that is a very, I have a feeling many women listening right now are just kind of tapping their nose going, yep, I feel that.
It felt really public. I mean, a wedding is quite public, and a divorce can feel like a wedding, but like nightmare version, sort of like dark opposite of a wedding, which is that you have the attention of your whole community. And instead of it being for a beautiful success and exciting future, it's for a failure that people don't really know what went wrong, but they know something went wrong. Um, and I think I felt like, oh God, I told everyone, I gathered everyone I know and told them I had everything figured out. And I turned out to not know anything. And now they know that. And so I think I wanted to seem like, don't worry, I'm still in control in many other ways. um, which again, I think letting go of that illusion of control is like such a big part of growing up anyway. And you're just a little bit too young to even know that. I hadn't even started my Saturn return.
It's true. Unless you've been through it, you really don't know. What to anyone out there listening right now who is going through a divorce or who is recently separated, what advice do you have for them? What is something that someone told you, solicited or unsolicited, that stuck with you or that you look back on now and are grateful that you learned through the process?
When I was in the very earliest days of it, and there's a paraphrased version of this in the book, but when I was in the very earliest days of it and I was kind of shell shocked that it actually happened, I think I did this, and I think a lot of people do, where I was like, okay, well, I have failed at finding love and at being lovable, and maybe love is just not for me, particularly romantic love, and that's fine. I'll just be sad for the rest of my life and alone. And a friend of mine was like, listen, I'm not trying to take away from how sad you feel, and you're going to feel sad for a long time. But it's also really going to surprise you how soon you start to feel better. You're going to find a different way of living that's going to have maybe less conflict in it, or that's going to allow you to be more authentically yourself in certain ways. And you can grieve what you thought you were going to have with this person. But you are also going to wake up one day, not even very long from now, and realize that your life is not just fine, it's good and maybe better. And that it might not, and the caveat I would add to that is that feeling doesn't necessarily last in a consistent way, but you do have days, even very, very close to the actual breakup, where you wake up and think, I think I did something difficult but good, and I think I feel good about the fact that I did it. And I think maybe I'm moving towards something better for myself. And that feeling is so exciting to wake up and feel. And so just like really try and notice it when it happens, because it will probably go away again for a bit. But eventually it will start to build. And that kind of sense of hope about about the possibilities of your future is a really important thing to try and cultivate while you're kind of disentangling what you thought the future would look like with this person.
I love that. All right. But thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to let you go, but I have one more thing. I like to ask my guests just 5 simple kind of like word association questions. So it doesn't have to be a single word. It can just be a thought, but the first thing that pops into your mind.
Okay.
Something that you like.
Candlelit dinners with friends.
Something that you know.
everything's going to be fine, but not necessarily how you thought.
Something that you hate.
The amount of pressure that me and every other woman I know puts on themselves about everything.
Everything. Something that you love that's not like friends or family, but something that you love.
Something that I love. Walking around in a city that you don't know very well with nothing to do that day, but go into little places that look interesting and sit down and eat a snack at different intervals.
And then a quirky little fact about you.
A quirky little fact about me. A quirky fact about me. Okay. The least likely fact about me, everyone's always like, what, is that I was a snowboard instructor as a teenager. I'm like the least athletic and least cool person in the world. And it's my favorite thing to tell people because they're always like, oh, okay. But yeah, I was a
in Toronto.
Yeah, outside of Toronto.
Or like north of Toronto.
Just like
that's amazing. How old were you?
I was 16. You couldn't tell me anything. I thought I was so cool.
That's amazing. It is wild when you think of like how many people just like pay teenagers to teach them to slide down a mountain of snow with like no formal training or licensing.
It was a big scam. I was not very good at snowboarding. But you don't have to be that good to be better than beginners.
This is true. Monica, thank you so much for hanging out. And I lied. I actually do have one last thing. And it is just how delightful. I loved all of the listing in the book, like all the lists that you would have. And just you have to read the book to really understand it. But I do want to know, in your own recovery process of, being separated and going through divorce, did you include Bill Hader in your Google search? Was that maybe something else that you relate to?
Anytime a celebrity got divorced, I took it as like a personal, like Adele got divorced a little bit too late for me to have the emergency reaction that I would have had. But if Adele had gotten divorced during my own divorce, I think I would have had a stroke. Anytime a famous person got divorced, I was like, we're going to be okay. Don't worry, Bill. It's going to be fine. I think you're just desperate for us. These like other people who know what you're going through. And then obviously your insane brain kicks in and is like, Bill Hader's divorced. Nobody knows how he feels. I know how he feels. We're going to start an email correspondence. This is going to really go somewhere. I'm going to be writing on Barry. We're going to have a connection after an appropriate amount of time. You know what I mean? Like you just go, one of the kind of fun things about divorce is that you go a little bit insane in a fun way as well as in a sad way, where you feel kind of like a mania some days where you're like, anything's possible. I'm starting over, baby. And I think that was part of that.
Yeah. And your fantasy, Maggie's fantasy that you wrote of Harry Styles being her new boyfriend.
You gotta get that into Harry's
John. It's like, it was just perfection. So truly, really good, actually. Congratulations. Your first novel. I also just in cruising the interwebs, so it said that you were working on it like being an actual TV series, which all of my fingers and toes are crossed for this because I just love Maggie so much and I would love to see it up on the big screen. Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations. And it's so lovely to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
A Super Bloom podcast is hosted by me, Candice King, produced by Melissa D. Montz and Diamond Imprint Productions, edited by Diane Kang, post-production sound by Coco Lawrence, and advertising partnership with Acast.